And just like that, The Sandman has now concluded, other than its bonus episode that's being released in just under a week's time. But for the most part, the story is now complete. After watching the first part of Season 2, I didn't mind it, but it felt like it was all about building towards this battle where the kindly ones were going to be going after Dream following him spilling family blood. And in Part 2, we pretty much saw that being at the epicenter of it, whilst also seeing Daniel being taken because he was destined to be the next Dream of the Endless. With an ending that saw core themes of progression, regret, love, and loss being at its core, let's dive into this video and break down all that there was to take away from the ending. Here is The Sandman Season 2 Part 2 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Dream's death. For the most part of this final season, we saw that Dream was looking to fight back against the kindly ones who were aiming to remove his existence following him spilling Orpheus's blood in the Season 2 Part 1 finale. During this time, he was contemplating on how it was that he was going to fight back, and it was only through time and understanding that he realized that there wasn't a circumstance where he was going to get out of there alive. Dream's whole arc has pretty much been about him coming to understand that he's changed as a person, when it once looked like he was somebody that was never going to be able to be empathetic, understanding, and have what I could only describe as human traits within him. But by the end of the season, with him coming face to face with the kindly ones whilst his realm was in disarray and ruin, he knew that there was a price that needed to be paid for the actions that he committed in spilling that family blood, and that there was no avoiding it. Pair that with the fact that he also said, "I'm tired." He knew that his time was up. Morpheus, being aware that he needed to pay a price for what he'd done, tied back into that selflessness that he'd come to adopt and gradually took over from that selfish nature that he once had within his core. He was a changed man, and he got that tale with a graceful end that he once got Shakespeare to write. The tale about a magician who became a man. Even though Morpheus said that he'd never leave his island and he'd never change, by the end he did, and that was enough. When tying Dream's death into the wider picture, it all stemmed from the selfless act that he did in killing his own son and putting him out of his misery. He knew that if he did that, then it would most likely bring about his own death, and he'd start a battle that he'd have a very slim chance of winning. But even in knowing that, he did it anyway. So he embarked on that quest because of the love for his own child, and by not being selfish. It showed that, in the end, Dream had transformed as an individual and that he wasn't the same as when the story began. There was growth and development, and it was interesting to see. Dream saw a higher purpose in all of it in the end, and even though he knew that, by sacrificing himself for something that mattered to him, those human characteristics came shining through, and it gave his life a purpose. The new Dream's purpose. What was particularly interesting about Daniel transforming into this new Dream of the Endless was that despite having some of Morpheus's memories within him, he simply didn't know how to approach holding the responsibility of being Dream. We saw that he was essentially trying to mirror what Morpheus did, and he was also bringing back people that died in battle due to the hands of Lyta. So this is the likes of Merv, Abel, and even Gilbert. However, it was when he brought Gilbert back that he told Dream that there was just no point in trying to do exactly what Morpheus did, because at the end of the day, Morpheus's journey ultimately led him to doing something wrong and ending up dying. So it wasn't necessarily the correct pathway to follow, but also at the same time, Gilbert called out how by simply just bringing people back, it took away the value of the life that they once lived. These people had lives and they died for a cause that they believed in, so to simply bring them back, it made their deaths in which they died fighting for the protection of the realm utterly worthless, because there was no consequence. So I thought that was a rather interesting approach for the show to take. The core theme of regret in death. There was a scene in particular that I thought was interesting during the final episode, and this was when the family all got up and spoke about their experience of being with Dream. What was so clear and obvious to see during their speeches was that they didn't truly know Dream. He was a part of the family, he was a face that they always expected to see. But upon his death, they had a deep sense of regret within them because they all felt like they didn't really make the effort to spend more time with him and to truly understand who he was as a person when he was alive. This is something that I think is relatable because many people often think that when they're mourning people that they love, there's always that what if question going round in their minds, and this was the case with the family. It also shone a light on the fact that even though this group of siblings were a family in the name, they weren't a family in the practice of it. showing that you have to be present when with one another to truly be a part of it, because as we saw when Morpheus was no more, they truly didn't know what to say to one another. What was interesting was that Destruction didn't quite have the same mournful, regretful tone. Rather than being inside of the funeral, he was walking around the castle that Morpheus had never invited him to whilst talking to Daniel. They were talking about life, the direction in which Daniel could go in, and how he didn't need to worry about what was in store for him because there was always two sides to a coin, meaning there's not just one decision that you can make, there's always the alternative one. Destruction didn't hold that regret in not knowing Morpheus as much as everybody else did, because I think he acknowledged that Morpheus was a closed book for a large part of his life that didn't want to let anybody in. But with the likes of Daniel, he already said to him that he was there for him if it all got too much. So that focus on doing things differently was also something that came out here. Right at the end of the episode, when we saw Daniel walk into the dining hall with the siblings there was laughter, excitement, and introductions all taking place. So it did make me wonder if the family were going to make more of an effort this time with Dream, because if something does eventually happen and this one ends up dying, they won't be standing up there having those exact same regrets as what they did with Morpheus. My review of the season. When it comes to this season overall, I thought it was just alright. I don't think it was anything special, and if I'm being honest, when compared to how I thought it would be following Season 2 Part 1, I think it fell short of my expectations. I thought we'd see a battle and a fight for the realm, but we just didn't really get to see that. When it came to Loki and Puck's story, I get why it had to be included, because we needed Loki to put Daniel on the fire so that he'd essentially become the god. But that whole part of the story just felt a bit inconsequential, and then when Loki was taken, it just wrapped up and felt a bit anticlimactic. Even Puck leaving Loki the way that he did. Whilst on the topic of relationships, the whole Joanna Constantine and the Corinthian was a pointless romance that didn't work in the slightest. The chemistry really wasn't there, and there just wasn't enough time to allow it to breathe and then ultimately blossom. Seeing her constantly looking at him from a distance whilst being besotted, I was just sat there thinking, you barely know this guy, so come on. The way that the story was structured was pretty simple and easy to digest, but my issue lies with the actual story itself. It just didn't have the crescendo that I was looking for. I wanted to feel emotional when Morpheus was coming face to face with death, but I was just waiting for it to happen and there was no emotional pull whatsoever. One of my biggest issues with Season 2 Part 1 was also present in this part. The siblings were barely in it. We know that Death and Dream have a pretty good relationship, but we didn't really get to see any of that, and the wider family were just a very pointless inclusion in the show, so I think it's a shame. We got introduced to Delirium in Part 1, and she was genuinely one of my favourite things about the first installment, but she barely featured in this part. I just don't know why the characters were stripped back a lot, especially when compared to the first season. I also thought that the CGI in some of the episodes was genuinely awful. It's a mixed bag with the CGI in this show. The Guardians just looked terrible when Lighter and the Kindly Ones were standing up the front. Honestly, I was baffled. When it comes to if this show is going to be remembered well, I don't think it will be. I think over time, year after year, it will just fade into obscurity. It's a shame because there was the potential to make a really great show and for Netflix to have a series that had endless possibilities in the palm of its hands. But I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Instead, we got one good season and a second season that failed to live up to what was once promised. So, there you have it, The Sandman Season 2 Part 2 Ending Explained. If you want to see the first part of The Sandman Season 2 being broken down, then check the video below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of the final season? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.